Okay. What's good, everyone? Welcome to the latest episode of Cops and Convicts with Sean Shepard. I am Sean Shepard. We're live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Please subscribe, follow, and hit the respective notification bells so you can stay up on what we're doing and when we're doing it. Today, my guest is Los Angeles County Sheriff Deputy, well, not deputy, Lieutenant. I'm so used to saying deputy.
You're good.
I don't spend a lot of time with lieutenants. Los Angeles County Sheriff Lieutenant CeeCee Strong. CeeCee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad that you have me. Thanks for allowing me to be here.
Oh, I'm happy to have you. We've been talking about this for a little bit. I'm glad we can make it happen. So the first thing I want to ask you is, what was your family's reaction when you told them that you wanted to be a member of law enforcement? What did they say to you? How did they react to that?
You know what? I actually stumbled into law enforcement, and my dad knew a recruiter, and they were having an event at Exposition Park. And I was at the time military, and I was driving for the United Parcel Service. So I was a driver. And there was a booth set up near where my parents' booth. They were really big in the community. And so my dad kind of urged me to fill out the card, like just fill it out. And I'm like, Dad, yeah, I'm cool. And it was that. So my parents never really had a problem with it either way. My dad was happy about it because he was happy about everything I did. That was my biggest fan.
That's great to have that support. So it was your father that encouraged you to fill out a card to become a member of law enforcement?
Yes, it was all him. And I did it kind of just appeasing him, filled it out. And literally the day before I was supposed to go down for the process of the testing, the written test, and then getting the packet, as they called it, I found it on the shelf, had come in the mail. I looked at it and I was like, oh, maybe I should just go down there tomorrow. So I don't have the story of, oh, I always wanted to be a law enforcement officer. I wish I could give you that story, but it didn't happen that way for me.
So what agency was your first agency?
Oh, Los Angeles County. So, I've always been with LA County.
So you're a lifer. You're one and done.
Yeah, and after the more recent turn of things, yes, it'll be a one and done.
Well,
yes.
we'll get to that. Well, I'm very interested to hear about that. So family was good. You've only worked at the LA County Sheriff's Department. What has been the biggest eye-opening experience for you since you've become a member of law enforcement?
I think the biggest, and it's probably an ongoing, is the constant gap or bridge or lack of a bridge between community and law enforcement. It seems like it's cyclical and we go into those same cycles of trying to fix the problem and it never really gets fixed. So I don't know that it's one specific thing, more so it's just, can we stop and can we get off this hamster wheel? So that's probably the best answer I can give you to that.
And what do you think the reason for that is, CeeCee? Lack of desire to fix the problems inside of the profession, or lack of ability? What do you think it's attributed to?
I think that the status quo works for certain people. And it's, for lack of a better word, laziness to a certain degree. People don't do well with change in anything. Even if it's changed for the better, it's like dragging and growing pains, and I'm not sure. And so I guess I would equate it to fear. You fear the unknown. You fear some people fear those that are within the community because it's new to them. You know, it's all shiny when you're putting the uniform on, but then actually interacting with people who are different from you, I think some people have a fear. And that either makes you overcompensate or it withdraw, you pull back. And that's on both sides, not just with law enforcement, also with the community at times. Anything that is change is a little hard to actually get across.
Well, when you think about the roots of law enforcement, there's been quite a bit of change when it comes to demographics. I mean, as most people know, the profession was strictly male and white. And now I like to call this the golden age of law enforcement, not necessarily because of behavior or outcomes, but it's the golden age of law enforcement as it relates to who can become a member of law enforcement. Law enforcement has never been this brown and this female in the history of the profession. And it's interesting when I look at somebody like yourself who has been inside the profession for how many years now? How many years have you been in?
29.
Okay, so you've been in the profession for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
In your 30 years, I'd like to believe that you've seen a big demographic change as opposed to when you entered the profession. How has the profession managed that type of drastic change? And I call it drastic because you went from one extreme to, if you've been in the profession for 40 years, 50 years, it's another extreme. What have you seen, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in terms of the changing face of law enforcement?
I think the biggest things that I have seen is this push for what I call hiding behind policies. We talk a lot about them and they're shiny and they're brand new, but behind the scenes, are we sticking with them? Are we actually enforcing those particular things? It sounds good, but getting to the root of the problem, I did see those changes that you're speaking about. The wave of one particular policy that had people held accountable for saying whatever they wanted to say. Prime example with the protected classes. We have now the policy with policy of equality, when that wasn't heavily held when I first came on the department. So I had a couple people who really, in their mind, they could say whatever they thought they wanted to me. And as kind as I can be, I'm also very quick to say, hey, let's have a chat. Don't do that. Don't say that again. And then it escalates from there. But I saw that wave and that change, particularly with things that had to be enforced that honestly, Sean, we lost. A lot of those things being enforced as heavy as they were is because people weren't trying to do the right thing and just do the job the way it was intended. So it's almost like you have to have these things enforced in order for you to behave or do the right thing.
Can you give me an example of something that was said to you that was completely inappropriate in a professional setting that they thought it was cool for them to say to you?
I would have quite often, and one thing that popped in my mind was a young lady that was in the booking area. She had been arrested. She had been screaming for some time, like at the top of her lungs. Of course, she was a Black woman. And I was called, and they're kind of getting me on the radio, and I go to talk to her, and the comment was basically, she's not listening to any of us. It's like, she's one of your cousins. Maybe you can calm her down. And I had someone.
You're breaking up, CeeCee.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're frozen.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm moving on my side and I can see you moving. So hopefully we can break through that. But what I was doing, and I'll go back to that, help the lady in the cell was basically your cousin, you come talk to her. Quite honestly, Sean, I'm a young deputy. I walk up to the cell and I start screaming too. I'm screaming just as loud as she is. And she's like, what's wrong with you? Same wrong with you. Let me get you out, fingerprint you, get you some food and get you on your way. And it's almost this, you can speak the lingo, so you go and handle that. Comments about when I wore braids, why do you all wear yarn in your hair? Oh, I had an actual lieutenant tell me that. And so it's little things over the years and little snippets and chips that after a while you're like, are you serious? And you're addressing each one, but there just weren't as many parameters put on that, if you will.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like, sounds like to me that is a common theme when you step into an environment where that environment is not used to you being in it, because I've experienced identical things have nothing to do with law enforcement. It strictly has to do with my black skin being in a white environment. And I was asked about my hair too. Why is your hair that way? Well, why is my hair what way? I didn't know there was anything different about my hair until I started spending time around y'all. you know?
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so how do you change policy and procedure to mitigate that type of language being directed towards you? I mean, how does that work, and how is it enforced?
Well, now you have what was 12 factors, but I think they now have added some. So anything based with your age, your ancestry, race, religion, your marital status, medical conditions, your sex or sex orientation, with your nationality, ethnicity. So there are 12, and I think I hit 10. But anything that's dealing with that now has to actually go on a report form, and it is carried from there, and it's determined case by case. Back then, that wasn't something that was highlighted. So when you say things are improved or they've, shifted from all those years, they have, but you're still going to get a large normal response of kind of quit being sensitive. Or the response that I just love is pulling a race card. In my entire time on the department, I never focused on my own race. I focused on getting my work done. But you make it about race, but say, no, you can't pull the race card. Well, I say, I can't pull a card from a deck that's not extended to me. And if you're extending comments like your little cousins and the yarn in your hair and little snippets of things that people don't, they would balk at probably more so in this day than back then, you can't then turn around and say, hey, don't pull a race card. Like, why are you asking me about my hair any different from your own? Like you said, my hair is on top of my head. The conversation should actually end at that.
Yeah, and when you're in that environment where you're clearly outnumbered, like there have been times where I've wanted to say what I've wanted to say, and you look around and realize it's probably not safe for me to meet that level of microaggression with my own level of microaggression. I look around and it's just me here. So that's one of the things that a lot of people don't talk about is when you step into an environment that is imbalanced from a demographic standpoint, it's not a healthy environment for the people that are in the minority, and I mean minority from a number standpoint. Can you speak to that at all? Has that element about the profession and the environment improved for you as opposed to when you first started? Can you look around and now feel like this feels a little bit more like home in terms of I'm not the only woman here. I'm not the only person of color in the room. Has that changed for you at all?
Okay, that's a loaded question, Sean. You put me out there on that question. I can say the more things have changed, the more they have stayed the same. And I know that's a cliche. You brought up a good point of what I call the censorship. I think there's a certain level of censoring ourselves for just the reason you said you're outnumbered. You're weighing that, pick and choose your battles. You know that you have a level of professionalism and has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not I'm black or white. I'm wearing this uniform just like you are. And I think you censoring is what they see all the way through until something happens and you speak out about things, which I never was shy with doing. I addressed, I meet you where you are. You're questioning my yarn. I usually will ask a question. What do you mean? And I put it back on them, like explain that. But I think there is such a censorship and a how would I say, maybe a self-assessment. And in those split seconds, we're like, is this worth the battle? That other races don't have to do. And you say whatever you feel. And it's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you upset about that? It's It's just my opinion. I mean, we can really talk about people with thinking that they have the right to say whatever they want to. But just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And oftentimes it is that self-assessment of, do I want this problem? Do I not? And Sean, let's not forget those small numbers that you talk about. We also have some that are all one race within our own race that I don't want to put my neck out to help you in any way. And actually, there's a competitiveness that now it's almost like that crab in the barrel. And I'm fighting and pushing to be seen more so than you, because there's not enough of us to go around. So I don't know if that kind of the censorship piece is always something. So I've been doing that from almost the beginning. You know, I walk into the academy classroom and I'm looking around, there's 7 of us, 7 in about 100 recruits. That's it. And in my mind, I can't help but think
that's a lot.
Yeah, actually, back in that time frame, it actually was, but that percentage is still very small. And nothing means that all 7 of us are going to bond together and get along and make this work for everybody in those 7. That's really not the goal. The goal is actually breaking down old mindsets to actually become an officer with safety and the protection and service. That's so cliche, but is it really happening? It's like you're there to learn what you need to learn to be a good officer. But I think that we carry a heavier load of that censorship and watching every step, the step that we make and every word that we say. I would equate it to a survival, because I'm glad that it is not all one race running the sheriff's department. Somebody else has to be there to create that level of difference. And if for no other reason, me being a help in that way, I'm happy to have done that. I'm a big, what's my favorite Bible verse? Isaiah 6:8. Here I am, Lord, send me. And then you're going to take the punches from the community side, from within, you know, my gender. It's pretty crazy. Very, very crazy.
I just think it's important to discuss these issues that exist inside a profession that has become so much of our, it's become so much of our focus nationally over the last, I want to say 10, 12 years, now that there's like 24-hour news cycle, people running around with their cell phones, and we're seeing things happen that there are groups of people that have always known these things were happening, but now they're being captured on camera. And when I turn on traditional, I don't even want to call it news, I want to call it media outlets, I don't get to hear about the profession from people within the profession that look like me. It's starting to improve. I'm starting to see more, but very, very little. When you talk about law enforcement, if someone were to just generally say, what comes to mind when you think of a cop? It's not you.
Yes.
It's not you. And
Absolutely.
so I think that it's important to give voices and platforms to people who have been inside the profession that can speak about the profession generally and from your own experience and standpoint. And with that, I want to ask you about being a woman in this profession. And what has that been like for you? Have there been any advantages to being a woman? Have there been challenges to being a woman in a profession that is still very male dominated?
Absolutely. In answer to your question, there have been challenges, and I will also say there have been advantages.
Let's start with the advantages.
Okay. The advantages is I wake up and look at me. I wake up in this body, and God created this. So I'm happy about that. The advantages are basically you get to add that flavor, and it's more of a giving back, I would say. because you deal with different things within the community. And that advantage is that women get to see us. You actually benefit because you get to help and aid. At least this is for me. You get to aid in things that are happening in the lives of women. There's a better understanding. You're able to sometimes calm things a little bit better than others. To let most people tell it, it's you're a woman, so you'll probably get that just to balance things out, much like my color. You're selected because you're a woman. But I get to dictate how I do that job once I'm in that position. I have to say that most people focus on the brotherhood. In a way, you can develop a sisterhood, but in that, you got to have some people willing to be in that sisterhood. So I have had some amazing women in my life through the profession who have been supportive. So you have that piece. Mm-hmm. And the ability to give back, if that was your goal when you came on the department, to other women and women of all color, not just about being a Black woman, but just being a woman in general.
Okay. Now the challenges.
Challenges of not being seen. And I say that because not just in the law enforcement profession, but just in general, it's a battle for women to be seen. Like my husband's on the department. So I can give you this in a story, and he tells this story better than me.
He saw you. He saw you.
Yeah, he did. And he did. He saw it. But we were sitting and talking, and people were coming in at an event. And just about every male law enforcement officer walked in, spoke to him, either dapped out or shook his hand, and it was like I was not standing there. I think that's probably the biggest challenge ever. Just not being seen, or I've even had this. I throw out an idea and it's paused. Well, we'll get back to that. We'll see. We'll circle back to that. And then that same idea is spoken by a man, and now it's the greatest idea on the face of the earth. So there's an invisibleness to that. I've had the challenge of people talking to my husband to see if I would come and work an assignment. Like, I know I've heard about your wife, she's doing really well. You think she would take this assignment? So I have to kind of go through him if I take that avenue, which I'm going to be honest with you. I always turn that down, because if someone's wanting to talk to me, I don't need Eric's blessing for him to actually say, you're sanctioned, now you can speak. And that's not in any way demeaning or downplaying his role, because I am a very spiritual person. And I believe that a man is the man of my household. I know if Eric's watching this right now, he's going, no, that's not true. But it is the truth. I firmly believe he's the head of the household. But my application process was mine. The background process was mine. And to overshadow that with, first asking about him or shaking his hand and then just ignoring me and walking on by, it's happened quite a lot, Sean. And it's usually the segue into communication with me. Another is now the fighting of women, because now there's only so many spaces, and it adds another layer to like that racial component. So if they're only looking for so many women, there's this cat fight in a sense to get those positions. So that can be challenging as well.
So I need to stop right there, because you're reminding me of something that happened during my coaching career. You go to an athletic department inside of a university, and there are certain lower level positions that are earmarked for a Black guy. Mm-hmm. And I know this for a fact because it happened to me at Boston College. And I was told by the guy that I was replacing, who was a Black guy, saying, you can get this job not just because you're qualified, but this position is for a Black guy. I said, oh, and I'm young. I didn't know that these things happened. I was in my 20s. And I find it fascinating for you to say there's only a certain number of female positions inside a particular agency, especially an agency as large as LASD, when all I keep hearing is that there's a shortage of members of law enforcement. So if there's a shortage, which I believe it to be true, why would you be particular about the gender of who's applying?
Well, I don't know that it's an earmarking. What you described, for example, when I promoted
Hang on,
to,
CeeCee, you're pixelating and you're frozen again.
I
Can
did. I'm so
can you try and
can you
move?
hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
You keep freezing though.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, I
We'll
want to
work
make
through
sure
it.
that.
We'll work through it. You're still frozen though. Now you're moving a little bit.
Okay, I am so sorry. I see movement on both the screens. But what I was saying is, and when I promoted to lieutenant, for example, there were 9 of us on the list of those promoting. I was the only woman. And the statement was made as the chiefs and commanders came in to talk with us. They're kind of going around the room asking the guys, because there are 8 other guys, and then there's me, where they were going to be assigned. When they got to me, one of the guys says, "Well, we know where you're going to be assigned," because it's understood I'm going to a women's facility. I'm a woman. So in that area, they're trying to make sure that there are plenty of women in there. So to a certain degree, it makes sense, but it can stifle you because maybe that's not the choice of where I want to go. Maybe I want to work a different area or not to be pigeonholed into a certain area, because at the end of the day, we do the same job. So it can't be that it's predominantly male, but when it comes to certain positions, that's more of a woman's type of position. Taking, for lack of a better word, a report that is of, an assault sort for a woman and going to the hospital. I remember, hey, you take the report. A lot of times guys don't want to talk about certain things. They don't want to do certain things. I remember being a drill instructor, when where, times a month, hey, yeah, you take care of that. I don't want to talk about that. But no one wants to feel like the best thing that you're here for is anything just women issues. Like, that's the worst of the worst. Now, that's not earmarked, but it's known. It's not a shock. It's not something someone could say, no, that never happens. It does. It exists, whether people want to say it or not. And I'm going to be honest with you, Sean, I've always been pretty vocal within my sphere and my circle of influence and reach. So this is not something that I wouldn't tell someone speaking directly to them, save for these platforms that you're allowing for people to speak about them.
I want to welcome everybody who's just joining us to the Cops and Convicts podcast. My guest is LA County Sheriff Lieutenant CeeCee Strong. CeeCee, when you talk about the facility that you were assigned to, please share with our viewers what you mean by that, because a lot of people don't know what the process of becoming a member of the sheriff's department is comprised of. Once you go through your training, you are what's your first job? Where are you assigned?
For the most part, the large majority of people are assigned to a custody facility. A few go to courts, but very rarely is anyone going directly to a patrol assignment. So you usually start out in a custody facility, one of the jails, and then you progress from there. My particular thing was I went to Sybil Brand, which is no longer in existence, and then I transferred over to Century Regional Detention Facility. And from there, my path took to courts and then on to patrol. So it depends, but for the most part, a large majority of people go through the court system, the custody side of things first.
So you just get out of the academy and you're thrust into this environment where the people you are sworn to serve and protect are in custody and are accused of committing some crime. I don't know. You can share with me how long you stay in that custody facility, as you refer to it, how long you're there, how does that shape your view of the general public when you're just out of the academy and you haven't even begun patrolling various neighborhoods yet?
Well, it's just as new, in my opinion, as going to patrol certain neighborhoods. It's a more controlled and compacted environment because you're literally in a module with large numbers of people that you are, monitoring daily habits and everything that they're doing and coming and going from court. But I think that that mindset is shaped depending on your own personal experiences. It's like you going to college for the first time, and you go to a school where there's no one that really looks like you. You walk into this environment and, well, no, I've never been arrested, I've never served time, so that's a different dynamic for me. But I also have a different language speaking to some of those people within custody, because I'm not first shock and awe that they don't look like me. It's quite an opposite, that a large number, and we know this, that the large number of the people in the custody facilities are Black and brown people.
In Los Angeles County. And I mean, generally speaking, yes, but, and I'm glad you brought that up. It was the thing that was most shocking to me when I went to juvenile hall for the first time, where there's 40 juveniles in a day room. 39 of them were Black and brown, and there was one white kid. And I thought to myself, this kid had to come to jail to be around people different from him. And why are these numbers so ridiculously imbalanced, especially when you look at, from a Black perspective, we're such a small segment of the population here in Los Angeles County compared to Latinos and whites and now Asians as well. I was taken aback and I was angry when I saw it. But you have to work in this environment. Imagine somebody who's never, imagine the one white kid that I was telling you that was in jail. Imagine that white person being an adult and stepping into that environment and never being around that many people of color before in his or her life.
And what that person is probably experiencing, but on a different level, because we're talking about being incarcerated, which is a different mindset than walking around in everyday life. But what that particular one child or man, I think you were saying juvenile hall, but whether it's a young man or a grown man, what they are probably also experiencing for the first time is the experience that a lot of Black and brown people experience, being the lowest number. And I would imagine that's a huge shock. Like, this is crazy. But instead of it making people, like anybody that's listening to us right now, I would always wonder, could they assess that in the way that you just did? Can you see that he is the only of his race in that sea of people, be it incarceration, be it in a hospital, be it in a profession, on a bus, in a hotel, wherever, in a restaurant? Does a person have the capacity to switch that thinking? Because oftentimes it's us that are switching our thinking. And I would wonder if people are sensitive enough to be the human race as opposed to segments of races. Now, that's not to say that we aren't obviously different races, but you can't say stop focusing on race. But at the same time, well, you're don't pull a race card, but we still have this push and pull in this struggle and this fight between the races. You cannot have it both ways. The best that you can hope for is someone like me that would see that one white kid in the juvenile hall, and literally in my heart, I'm kind of sympathizing with him. I'm going to be honest with you, because I would wonder if there's an anger factor that, wow, now I used to be on the outside and I was the only. Now here's this one only. And I'm going to be honest with you, when I see that, I see them more a little fearful, and they kind of stay quiet. And for the most part, those in the experiences I've had, they stay real close to me as the officer in that dorm room. I'm just being honest with you.
Well, let me correct you. I don't think you sympathize with that one kid. You empathize with that one kid because you've been there. you've been there. And what a blessing for you to be in that facility and have that shared experience at some point in your life and extend yourself to that young man when you don't have to. But I want to get back to the officer or the deputy who just got out of training and is now in this environment filled with black and brown juveniles when he's never been around this many black and brown juveniles. How do you think that shapes his or her view of black and brown juveniles when you walk into a facility, that's all you see? Must be something wrong with these kids. Must be something wrong with these people. Because I don't see my own people in here.
Absolutely. And
You know
so
what I
I would
mean?
say, yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the correction. Empathy compared to sympathy, very big difference. And yes, I can empathize, but it depends on what that person grew up with.
Yep.
It can be validation for them that this is what I grew up with. And people have been telling me all along that these people were like animals, they were like savages, whatever they learned. It can be that. It can be a fresh out of college graduate who did have a little bit of experiences with it, depending on what classes they took. They learned a little bit more about other people. So I don't even think it's 100% the same for each person walking in there, be they black, white, Asian, Hispanic. There is, depending on your background and what you were exposed to and experienced in life, you're going to handle that differently. Unfortunately, the flip of where it is usually the majority of one race compared to small trickles of others, I think it's a little bit tougher on the side of someone who never was around anybody black and brown. And I would agree with you that now I'm looking at that person and, well, that confirmed what I thought. That confirmed what my mom or dad said. And again, I say these without 100% because I don't think all white people look at black folks as animals or savages. However, I think if that is what you're exposed to constantly, and then you walk into that dorm and that's what you see, I could see someone having a mindset not as open. If they're not grounded within who they are, they're not trying to be as open. If there's the fear of this is a new job, I don't really know how I did with even learning all of this. There's so many parts and facets to that. But it brings me to mind the movie The 13th. For anyone who has never seen that movie, it explains all of that from the history behind the jails being so padded in that way, that it is mind-boggling.
Do you think it's a good idea for a deputy fresh out of the academy to immediately be immersed in that type of environment where you're around people that are accused of committing a crime? Do you think that negatively shapes their perception of the general public at all? Because I've heard deputies share that. I want to know what you think.
I think that based on, it's only as good as what they're trained with. I think that we need to work on our systems of continued training, not a training that you get and then you shift, because a lot of the training is patrol based. So you're training for once you get to the street, but then your first assignment is the jails. The training so that you can get a little bit of both of those right out of the gate would actually help and could potentially, because you don't know unless it's ever tried, it could potentially help with that. But I have to say this, my first training officer in custody, I had two different ones. First assignment, who was the epitome of that fearful that we were talking about. This is a new for them. All they see is one particular race.
Yep.
I had that training officer basically tell me, because something that she wasn't liking in the moment, to withhold the mail from the inmates. Now, what you're getting out of withholding mail for inmates, I have no clue. It's like this punishment of sorts. I, in turn, because I'm that one that will raise my hand and be like, I'm sorry, excuse me, got a question. That doesn't make sense. I speak to the sergeant. I end up giving the mail out anyway, because I'm not going to go off my shift and then create more work for someone else. Then I get my other TO when I get to the other facility. This person took me step by step through my entire training packet. There weren't any quick sign-offs or, we'll get to this later and then you don't get to it. They were methodical in how they trained me. Now, of course, I came in with more of a connection, if you will, and understanding. But I think the training can help with that, be it you going into custody or patrol. It's the level of continuing training. And here's one thing that I've always said. There's a statement that is made that I do not care for. I know what you learned in the academy, but now I'm going to teach you the real way of how to do things. It's a big joke, but what do you mean? You're going to teach me the real way to do things. I just learned how to be a leader, be of integrity, do the right thing. And now there's some other little secret hideaway that I don't know about. And so I think the training could offset that. It's not just about you putting them on the streets, because when you think about it, patrol, there's a whole level of much more unknown out in patrol. You're in a car and you don't know, you're trying to find on the maps where you're going, you're trying to understand the laws. I think both of them equally bring a dynamic that requires continuous training, continuing reinforcement from our upper management that, hey, we got to stay immersed in that moment when I walked across that stage with white gloves on and I'm in the best shape of my life. You got to hold on to that, because the integrity piece will keep you from some of all of that other stuff that comes into play. And the public gets to see a large majority of the negative. They don't see the thousands of really good officers that no matter what they're presented with, what race they are in it to do the job well. I say, do you wear the uniform, or is the uniform wearing you? And there is a big difference in either or, whatever side of that you're on.
When you ask the question rhetorically, is the uniform wearing you? Are you speaking to what that uniform and that badge can do to you psychologically from an authoritative standpoint, or the power that you now possess, and how you can use that uniform and badge for evil as opposed to good? Because I just did a podcast last week with 3 former members of law enforcement, and they were in Southern California, Arizona, and Illinois. Mm-hmm. And what they went on and on about how the power corrupts members of law enforcement, and that the power got the best of them while they were in uniform, where the profession, the job, became more important to them than anything else in their lives, including God, including family. And they said it was because they became drunk with power.
Absolutely. And you see it all the time. And I'm just thankful that I was never drunk with that power. And I'm not going to lie to you, Sean, I had a really good career. Like I could have embellished the being on television and representing the department and being a drill instructor and all that came with that. But my idea is, who am I at the end of the day underneath that uniform? It's not a Superman thing that I wear with my regular clothes covering it and I pop out and I'm this superhero. I am putting on the persona of integrity, leadership, the mindset that you carry into things. You got to have that compassion for people, a love and respect for other human beings. And if you don't have that, it becomes that power struggle. Like I'm just here and I'm the law, and people get upset when folks say, "Well, I pay your salary because I pay taxes." People that would get angry about that statement are probably some of the people that you're speaking about. You're drunk on that power that you do what I say, you should have complied. Right now, I have to give credit to my husband for this statement. He says, we are the paid professionals. We're the ones with the rule book. The people on the street don't have a rule book to play by. And it's up to us to be able to de-escalate situations. to not be the reason that they escalate. We're supposed to be the decompressors. I used to tell the recruits this. If someone comes to you and they're at a level of an 8 and you're starting out at level 0, you got a whole lot of wiggle room on what you can use to try to calm that person down. But if you get to their level and you make the statement, if you open your mouth again, I'm going to shoot you. And they stand there and say absolutely nothing, but open and close their mouth. Like, go ahead. Are you going to shoot them? You made the decision to make that statement that never should have come out of your mouth. But if you're so, how do you say, they're drunk on the power and that control, that becomes a huge problem when you can't completely back that. And now you've gone too far. How do you back that down? You're best to stay in that, hey, sir, you know what? Calm down. You're okay. Let me let you get it out. And it's verbal up to a certain extent. But if you're high on ego, it's going to get to you. And you might say something that you really should not say. I believe when the statement of the rhetorical question, does the uniform wear you or you wear the uniform? I believe we should be wearing the uniforms. It is not about the uniform is all and everything. And I don't care about my family and I don't care about, like you say, about God. And all of it is encompassed in wearing that gun belt and that badge. That is a dangerous place to be. And honestly, Sean, there are people that are there. I would wager the bet that they aren't outnumbering the rest of the people so much as the image of those who portray that has overshadowed those that are doing the job well. And you only hear about the bad. Very rarely do you hear about the good, the ones wearing the uniform and not the other way around.
You made me recall a game changer training that we did. I think it was our last one actually in September. A young lady asked the members of law enforcement that were participating that day to raise their hand when she asked the question, have any of you had a partner that put you in a position where you could have lost your job because of their behavior? There were 6 members of law enforcement in that room. 5 of them raised their hand saying, yes, I was working with a partner who was doing some nefarious stuff that could have made me lose my job. Have you ever been in that position? Have you ever had a partner that put you in a position where you could have lost your job based on their behavior?
Not really per se where I could have lost my job because of their behavior, but I would say it in this way, Sean, I was there, so could have been. So like your behavior actually is going to hang you up. So now I feel like I need to step in to take you out of that. Luckily, I haven't worked around, and I didn't work around people like that in my younger deputy years. It's when I got into the upper management ranks, when it gets a little more at that tip of the pyramid, and there's like, people doing all kind of nefarious things to be seen, that I had people that would do some things. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. It goes back to that whole push for policy. We don't need new policy, Sean. This is just me. We need to go by the ones we have. But it sounds good to put this speech, well, we're going to put out a new policy. And then it takes 8 months to come up with this policy. Well, that's 8 more months of craziness until you get to that policy. Put in place what we already have. And so I've had to step in. And one thing popped in my mind of someone who, and basically they were having an inmate stay in a certain setting longer than the policy stated. And very much so, had I not been paying attention, I guess I could have been roped into that. But I had to tell the person because they were emphatically the uniform wearing them. This is what I'm passing on to you. And this is what happened. And this is how long the inmate's been there. And I'm like, whoa, 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 that's 2 hours over. Did you know that? And luckily, I had a rapport with medical staff and the mental health people that work within the building who were able to say, well, yeah, we've been monitoring, we've been watching. But that could have been, that's something that could have caused someone to lose their job. Mistreatment of an inmate. Let's not even get started with the spoiled food in my situation and potentially the harm that could have come to thousands of people. So I guess in a way, yes, but less of because of my partner, because honestly, Sean, I wouldn't sit there and watch that. A lot of times I'm like, yeah, slow yourself down. I'd rather take it and then I'll work on it. And then you go take a breather, walk away, because I wasn't willing to risk. I'm not going to be in a situation where I'm constantly censored. I keep using that word because it's the truth. I got to go over and above and beyond to censor myself. And you're going to be doing me dirty. And I got to try to monitor you as well. I have enough to deal with what I have to deal with. So I was always pretty much like, nah, we're not doing that because that's some craziness. The different way to approach it.
Well, perfect segue. Perfect segue into this book that you've written. And I want our viewers to see the cover of the book and the name of the book, Betrayal and the Badge. And I want to give you an opportunity to speak at length about what's the main thing that caused you to name the book, not just write the book. We'll get to why you decided to write the book.
Okay.
But why did you decide to name the book Betrayal and the Badge?
Because betrayed is what I felt initially once everything stopped spinning for a second, because I was confused about what I was being pushed into. And I felt betrayed because of the length of time, for the same reason I keep talking about that censorship. I have worked hard to make sure that I am staying in the realm of integrity, the leadership, the walk, I will, if you will, as being a Black woman in a uniform, of dealing with the dynamic of being Black in uniform and part of the community. And you're going to get from all three of those entities something different. And to have censored myself in a sense for all those years, to come to being lied on so profusely, fabrications of a case that was placed on me, I felt a heavy betrayal because I'm wearing the uniform. And I can only imagine, if you do this to me, what would you do to people, and what have you done to people out on the street?
So I want to go over some of the words that you have on the cover of this book.
Okay.
Puppets, cronyism, laziness, career, derailed, fabrications, incompetence, lies repeated. I'm assuming that you were very deliberate in what words that you wanted to use on the cover of this book, and it doesn't sound like the type of environment that I would want to immerse myself in professionally. And I know that you didn't think that you were signing up for any of that when you decided to become a member of law enforcement. Talk to me about, I'm going to pick one of these words.
Okay.
I want to pick the word puppets. Talk to me about the puppets that you have encountered throughout your career, and I'm sure you've written about in this book.
So when I say puppets, there is, again, at the point of that pyramid, unfortunately, in this profession and in this agency, let me correct that, there is nothing beyond the rank that I'm at right now in the way of testing to get to the next ranks. So it is a selection process, basically based on who is liking whoever else. And with that lack of the merit, it doesn't allow for independent thinking. It doesn't allow for people to showcase, this is what I'm capable of. It is basically being placed, or in a sense, gifted a position. Well, that's not going to come without something. You know, people are big on loyalty. And so when I call a puppet, I am a firm believer. And the reason that I wrote about these things in the book was that there was a shopping of sorts to find just the right supervisor in order to enact the demise and the derailment of my career. You get a promotion, and guess what? This is your assignment. And I firmly believe that. I know it has happened to other people. Most people wouldn't speak about things like that. Some people would say, oh, you're saying that now because of what is happening. Well, absolutely. You can hear about it. It could be a rumor. You could think about it. But I've always known how that promotional process has been. That's nothing new. And that has been hey, this is coming straight from the top. This is coming from a chief. This is coming from a commander. It's the explanation of the title preceding the importance of whatever the mission is a problem, a huge one. And in my case, I went through 6 supervisors that never had any problem. As a matter of fact, my evaluations and how they viewed me was outstanding. That one puppet was ready to do the bidding of those willing to give you that next step up.
So this is what I would like to do. Give me a second, since you brought that up.
Okay.
Give me a second. I want to share with our viewers exactly what you're talking about. So
you didn't tell me we're doing show and tell. I'm sitting here with bated breath, waiting. Like,
I'll do the show. You do. I'll do the show. You do the telling.
You do the telling. I get it.
Okay. Hang on. Give me a moment. All right. So it's processing. Hopefully, here we go. Here's your evaluation. Here's your evaluation. I want our viewers to, if you're on your phone, if you're at your computer, take a screenshot of CeeCee's evaluation that you made public. Now, you know I'm not doing anything out of school.
You did. Right? I did.
So you made this public, and I read it, and it looks like a stellar evaluation of your performance. Okay, so here's a stellar evaluation of your performance from November 30th, 2018 to November 29th, 2019. So that's a year.
Yes.
CeeCee, what happened? What happened after this evaluation? What happened to you in your career that has you at a point where you're in litigation with the sheriff's department? You've written a book, and don't think I didn't catch you 20 minutes, half hour ago when you talked about your career in the past tense. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So what happened after that evaluation is there's actually another one that goes 19 to 20 in similar strain. And the one that would be after that one would have actually challenged the lies that were put in place. So in all honesty, before I get to the eval, I'm going to answer your question. What happened? So what happened with me is there's an old movie called Gremlins. And so I was this cute little fluffy, stellar person in law enforcement, and someone spilled accidentally water on me and I became a gremlin. That's the best analogy that I can give, because that's from day and night of what I really am and what was fabricated about me. That's what it felt like. The evaluation that you just showed was basically not in existence. Are you ready for this? Until 2022.
So that evaluation didn't surface until 2022?
At the moment that I was said to be the gremlin and the ogre and doing all the things that I was accused of, I hadn't had an evaluation in 3 years. And I paused because it goes to show how stellar my career really was. The supervisor prior to the one involved in all of this madness saw in me what I would always do. And Sean, I can't tell you that by any stretch of imagination that I'm a perfect person. I can't tell you that I was the best and the best of the best in my job, but every single assignment where I was assigned, I always left it better than the way I found it. That was my goal. My father was key in that. You leave something better than the way you found it. I hadn't had an evaluation when all of this started to being kind of put in place. And when I asked for them, it kind of alerted to, uh-oh, it doesn't add up. So they were held for that time. And the supervisor who wrote those two, the one you showed and the one after it, knew what I was really about and wrote truth. Those evaluations then kind of sat on a desk because it didn't line up with what was about to come. I then got the 2020 to 2021 in late last year, 2023. And blatantly obvious that it doesn't line up. And I'm glad that you actually pointed that out. I've never even talked with you at length about that. But anyone really paying attention, and you must have been because you saw that in my page, they would know exactly what you just said. I was, in essence, marched into an office thinking I was going for one particular meeting, a conflict resolution meeting with the supervisor who had not given me an eval. And instead, I was told that I was being placed under investigation and transferred from my position. Totally blindsided. No clue that it was coming.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue. I had spoken with the chief the day before and reported things about my supervisor as far back as March of that same year. This was in October of 2021. I arrive, I'm thinking, okay, here, I just talked to her yesterday. She told me this isn't going to go past this week. Let me do some things in place. I'll have my secretary reach out to you. Secretary reached out to me, and I was told to come and meet with the chief. I get there, and instead, my immediate supervisor places me under investigation and transfers me.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue. I can say out of the blue with being told that. But prior to that, this is my firm belief, is that I am a casualty of political warfare. My husband, how dare he use his God-given right to go down to the Bechdel building and sign up and decide he wants to run for sheriff. Unfortunately, at that time, the incumbent that was sitting in that seat and I had a history. He had made a statement similar to what we've been talking about this whole time about Black women that he never should have said. I happened to overhear it as a young deputy, and so goes a series of attacks that continued through a couple of years.
So you overheard what he said, and he found out that you overheard it?
Yeah, he looked at me after he had said it. He was on the phone and across the hall in the different room from where I was.
Did you confront him about it?
I did not.
So he's hanging on to something that he knows that you saw and heard. You didn't say anything to him about it, but he held on to that and did what with it?
Well, I think that when people know they've done something wrong, what do? They cover. That's their immediate rush. He then wrote a memo to the captain of the station. And in the memo, he was attacking and going after me, as well as my then partner, Eric Strong, my husband. So he wrote this memo to create this narrative of us being problem children. Where he messed up is that he left a copy of this on the copy machine. I'm sure by accident. Maybe he thought he printed it or it didn't work the first time. But by the time I'm scooping up work that afternoon, which was probably about a week after the statement was made, I get possession of this paperwork. And I'm incensed because you're basically defaming my character. I take it to the lieutenant, and the lieutenant says this has already been addressed and actually gives me a copy of how it was addressed in an email discussion back and forth between this sergeant and the lieutenant on behalf of the captain. In it, the lieutenant is even telling him, if these people were horrible people, what were you doing as a supervisor? He then returned with, well, I thought they were doing this over here, but I checked and I found out it wasn't the case. And then it was squashed. But by now, it's like a courtroom. I say what I want to say, and then it gets stricken from the record, but it didn't stop the jury from hearing it.
You're breaking up again, CeeCee. You're breaking up again.
I'm so sorry. Tell me where and when you can hear me again.
Your voice is good. Now
okay.
you're back.
Okay. I am so sorry for that. I don't know why. I never really had that happen. Somebody doesn't want me to tell you this, Sean. That's what it is.
Well, we're gonna
Um,
get through it.
but the paperwork was that first stage. Then it was an incident where we took 4 children on a trip to Florida. My then partner and I, 4 children that we took for a PAL program, Police Activities League. When we arrived in Florida, we learned that the sergeant, who that was his position over us as deputies at the time, had called ahead and canceled the trip, canceled our registration. Now we're flying with 4 children. You know we're flying with 4 children. And out of spite, you call ahead and do damage to children to get back at us. Horrible. Luckily, there was a conversation had by my partner between the two of them. We then spoke with the lieutenant. The lieutenant apologized, got us reconnected with the program. And then when we returned, he had been transferred out of his position. To say that he's probably really upset that your memo didn't work and now the doing wrong to some children didn't work, I couldn't even begin to tell you how bad that is and how bad that particular situation was and how he was probably thinking that I gotta get her. I got to actually somehow get her. Well, fast forward the next year, because this was in 2004, we were called into the office and the new supervisor said, "You're being placed under investigation for failure to report force." And I'm sitting there stunned, like, what? And as he's telling me about what happened, I remembered the incident. And so I say, hold on a minute. I go to my office and I pull a copy of emails from my partner and I. And we had actually notified not only this sergeant who's gunning after me, but 3 other sergeants and 2 lieutenants, because the incident they spoke about, the 2 girls that were involved in this, that we did have to use force on, they went to the station afterwards and there was a complaint made. We did our reports, but the one saving grace was that I told my partner, we both are writing this. And I said, Eric, you write an email, I'm going to write one. Because I don't trust it, because the previous sergeant who was friends with the incumbent, and I'm using that just because he was at the time of this election, he was the response sergeant to the field and told us, no, don't write the report. We're reporting force.
You're gonna have to say that. You're gonna have to say that again because you're breaking up again.
Okay, where do you want me to go back to?
I want you to go back to when you started talking about the incumbent and what he started to do.
Okay, so he literally was basically, in essence, saying we had used force and failed to report it.
Got it. We got that.
And the responding sergeant to that incident told us, even though we're reporting to him, hey, we use force on these kids, we are reporting it to you now, we're going to get our report done later. He said, that wasn't really force. Can't make this up. We do the reports anyway, but I didn't trust it to submit them. If someone's telling me no force, we sent email with the narratives of what happened. Well, in email, sometimes there's a read receipt.
Right.
So in the read receipt, one incumbent read it the very next day when he returned to work. It happened in 2004.
You were a deputy at this time, correct?
Yes.
So what I'm curious about is how often in an agency so large does a deputy have this interaction and encounter with the head of the agency?
I was a deputy. He was a sergeant at the time.
Oh,
he was my immediate supervisor.
So the incumbent was your sergeant at the time.
Yes.
And years later, he's bringing this up.
Well, think about it, Sean. I've made the statement I shouldn't have made. I left paperwork on the copy machine and it boomeranged and landed on me. I canceled a trip. maliciously with some children going to a police activity lead program. And I got in trouble for it and transferred because I did it. The following year, I lied about a force case and said that these two people failed to report force, and they come and produce paperwork against what I'm claiming. Oh, it gets better. A couple of years after that, there was the desire for him to come and work at the academy. At that time in 2007, I had been filming with Fox reality show for the Academy show. I went to my captain and said, I need to transfer out. If that particular person is coming to this assignment, I don't want to be here. He's already come after me with this, and this, and I don't want to be a sitting duck for another shot. Unfortunately, that didn't work because the captain was like, no, you're in the middle of filming and you're going to keep going. We have to figure out something else. So if you can imagine the level of anger, probably with each of these things that are chipping away, I liken it to, and I speak about this in the book, I'm page 8 of his own lawsuit against the department back then. He speaks about the 2 deputies that he was not able to discipline, but we never needed discipline. And even in his own words, he rebutted what he initially put out there and accidentally left on a copy machine. Not making this up. I have those documents. And it's now you're in a position to control the entire narrative of the department. It was only a matter of time before you would come after me. But now imagine my partner, now husband, is running for sheriff. What a slap in the face that must have actually felt like. You're already disliking me because I even was questioned about some of the things that happened back then. And I was the person that had to actually speak to some of this behavior. He doesn't like me. Never got a chance to get to know me because he was only our supervisor for 6 months.
So I want to make sure I understand the timeline. He was your supervisor for 6 months back in the day.
2004, February to July.
And when were you called into an office to be notified that you were under investigation for failure to report force being used?
2005.
Okay.
The following year.
Okay, so all this is happening while he's still a sergeant and you're still a deputy.
Yes.
So he did this back then.
Yes.
Okay, so your husband ran for sheriff in the last election cycle.
Correct.
And he's the incumbent.
Yes.
So where does this play into where you're being persecuted?
It was a series of a shift in the supervisor that arrived as my new supervisor.
At this point, you're a lieutenant.
At this point, I'm a lieutenant. Yes.
Okay.
Fast forward to the time frame that you're speaking about. Some
So
months before.
You're a lieutenant. You have a new supervisor,
Mm-hmm.
and your husband is running to replace the incumbent.
Yes, for the most part. It hadn't started when she first showed up. Hence, the first couple of months she was my supervisor toward the tail end of 2021. There was really nothing that was going on. I felt some of the sting of change and shift in my assignment as early as January of 2019, a month after the change of the seat. But I didn't quite grasp all of it as things were unfolding because I'm just kind of like, And remember, I'm the sitting duck thinking that this person now has taken the top seat. It's only a matter of time before I'm going to feel the sting again because everything was failing along the way in those earlier time frames. So the first parts of the month with this commander, no issues. And then suddenly the anonymous letters and complaints started about my work. The first announcement of an anonymous letter that or a complaint that had been received, she accidentally let it slip and gave me names of people who supposedly were in this anonymous complaint. So, me being the task rabbit that I am, I sent an email telling her, based on what you shared today, here are all the people that you're speaking of based on rank. And here are the reasons why these folks would have something negative to say about me. So it was a series of these anonymous complaints that trickled all the way up for about 9 months and then finally led to the investigation. That was January when the first little touch of that started happening. By May, there was an accidental leakage of my husband being on the ballot. He hadn't announced it himself, but in support of him, someone well-wishing actually announced it, that this is someone that's going to be running for sheriff. I saw an literal shift the same month that that took place in my supervisor. And it was like then she was the gremlin who had gotten wet or fed after midnight. And now everything was wrong with my work. And each time she said, this was wrong, I had a document to dispute it. And then she'd say, this was wrong, I had another document to dispute it. My thought, full circle, Sean, is that because you couldn't attack my work, like the evaluation you just shared, you couldn't attack my work, so you attacked where I grew up. Most of the claims were about me being none short of a thug from Compton, a bully, mistreating my staff. I made them feel a certain way, but I had acquired a unit there was no accountability, no shared files, records. There was nothing to speak of other than a bunch of pictures of parties and food platters, because we were responsible for 65 locations all over the county. Under that command, I had 8 locations where kitchens, where things were being shipped countywide, constantly, a constant rotation of distribution. $30 million budget that I'm in charge of. And within a blink of an eye, I go from that to then being an ogre and stripped of my command, stripped of my position, and transferred to go and sit and do no less than monitoring people, making sure that we are keeping the inmates safe. It was a betrayal. I circle back to that word. It was unwarranted. It was not something that I deserved. And it was a bunch of people saying, hey, I can jump aboard, and I have a story where she counseled me and I didn't like it. Oh, and this particular thing happened with her. I had someone actually accuse me of an assault, Sean. If I had assaulted someone, why was I not arrested or a report taken and me being marched away if I really committed a crime? But it got to be to the point where now we've got to keep the lies going. And no one wanted to hear me out.
They accused you of assaulting another member of law enforcement?
Yes. Not a sworn member, but not that that matters. But that accusation, unfortunately, had happened 4 years prior, 2 years prior. I'm sorry. 2 years prior, the same person had made that same allegation, and it was already documented and found to be unfounded. So majority of what was in my case was old things that were tried and failed and then just rehashed.
So she tried to run it back.
Oh, no, didn't just try. She ran it back repeatedly to the tune of many people.
So your supervisor sounds like the puppet here. I'm looking at these words. Lies repeated, running it back, fabrications. I see now why you chose these words on the cover of your book. Now, what I can't see here because it's too small, and despite the fact that I have these glasses, talk to me about these drops of blood.
What of blood.
What are the words inside each drop of blood? I'm going to pull this up for our viewers. Let me see if I can do this. Okay.
The first one on the left says statute date ignored. If you knew that I was a bully, you had a year's time to handle whatever that was. And there's a lot with the statute date. No evaluations in 3 years. You brought that up, Sean. I didn't have to. So you even hit one of the blood drops without even knowing it in the moment. Promoted for payback. My supervisor told me the first day that I met with her, also telling me how great I was in my position because we had worked together before when we were both lieutenants at the same time, that she had been resurrected. So she had been moved from a pretty prominent position and taken backward in her own career upon the arrival of the incumbent or shortly thereafter. And with this, she's now being promoted into a position, and I'm about to get another promotion, a bump back up. So whew, I don't have to sit over there and roast in that place that they sent me to when I was banned from the island. She equated it to being resurrected. And when she used that word, I literally, with my faith, I'm thinking, like, Jesus Christ, wow, great to be you. And she says, it's a matter of time before you would promote as well. And I distinctly remember saying, nah, I don't think so. And I left it at that. In that moment, I had received text messages, phone calls, people telling me and warning me and saying, oh my goodness, we just heard who's going to be your supervisor. So sorry. People knew. One of the words on the book cover with the cronyism, it speaks largely to that top of the pyramid in positioning. I get it. Get your promotions. Set your family up for better with more money. But here, do me a favor, pick up this integrity, pick up this leadership, pick up this management style. Go read some books to help you if you can't. If it is only about a title, and people are title struck, not just in this profession, but in all professions. Take along with that the things that are going to impact the community, that are going to do better for the community, that are going to bridge that gap that just keeps widening because no one wants, you got to be in it for the right reasons. If you're just in it for the money, of course I'll take that promotion. What do you need me to do? Sir, ma'am, whoever's above me. And safe to assume, Sean, I promoted you, Sean, because you're my buddy. I got to look out for you and your family financially.
But now I owe you something.
Absolutely, Sean. It's not going to be too bad. I just need you to kind of, go along with this, that you just follow me, Sean, into this room and, just follow my lead. And then you get to what you said, where people are raising their hands saying, yeah, I had it where one of my particular partners put me in a bad position. And in that moment, what's your decision? Are you going to go with it or are you going to stop it? And 9 times out of 10, if you stop it, Sean, so stops your career path. I was once asked by a commander, separate incident, you need to decide, because I refused to change something on a report. Wasn't doing it. I'm not going to lie. You need to decide what hill you're going to die on. I took my collar, which had the bar on it as a lieutenant. I looked down at it. I said, I guess I'm going to remain a lieutenant for a long time to come. I was not willing to compromise, and I can't test to that next rank, but I wasn't going to compromise who I am to fit in to think about it. I keep bringing up the word censorship. I've done enough not to yell and scream each time someone said something they shouldn't have said to me. I've done enough to take the high road and say, hey, I'm here for a different purpose. I can make something good out of this. And mentoring. I couldn't tell you the number of people that sent messages to me when all this happened. Like, I don't care what they say. I don't believe that. It ain't lining up. And I'm telling you, Sean, it's not my personality. But if you think about it, my work wasn't something that could be attacked. So you had to attack my character. And reaching back all the way to me growing up in Compton, you did a background check. Wouldn't you have known if I was a bully or involved in a gang or connected to some nefarious something? I joined the military, Sean, and went to a training between the 11th grade and senior year during my entire summer. A week after I graduated from the high school, I was on a plane to go to boot camp. I served in the military. I served in public service for now almost 30 years. And to have this happen to your career because someone has a bitter grudge, my husband decides to run for sheriff, 15, 16 people say, hey, if they bury her, then all of my dirt gets buried too, because then they'll question any decision she made. Betrayed, betrayal in the badge, almost like Beauty and the Beast. That's what this felt like. It felt like I was up against the entire department as the Goliath, and I was little David, and I should have just gone away. All that censorship, all of that leadership, all of that doing the right thing, and I will continue to do that. Nothing will deter me from that. But it all came to a head with you now calling me no less than a bully, intimidating staff. You know, I even remember one of the anonymous things being that I mistreated someone with a disability. You got to be kidding me. And that's what led to my face changing. And the day the supervisor was telling me about this anonymous complaint, I almost chuckled because I'm like, you got to be kidding me, right?
Where's the proof of that, though?
Well, it was just this person and others in that same rank realm said this. I then responded in a lengthy email explaining about how all 6 of those people, this would be the reason they would try to come after me. She had an interaction with me with the email, supporting me, knowing that you are a great person. And we don't understand where any of this is coming from. But it was a schmoozing, is what I think in hindsight, looking back. And so it was all just baby stepped. And then, wait a minute. He didn't sign up to run for sheriff, did he? How dare he step out of, he's not supposed to be on that ballot.
So these were simply accusations.
Sean, the whole thing was Sean Shepard said that I made him feel bad. Sally Sue said that, in this occasion, I just felt like I couldn't talk to her. Just silliness. I was unapproachable. I had an open door policy. People came and went out of my office. I have no idea.
So this sounds to me, the name of this podcast is called Cops and Convicts, and we've had convicted felons on this show quite a few times before. And what you're describing to me sounds like the enhancements that were added to their sentence that don't have to be proven. People just, all they have to do is say this was an accusation. And now your sentence has 10 more years added to it for each enhancement that does not have to be proven.
Yes.
That's what this sounds like to me.
Yes. And I immediately, 2 months after it happened, put out a snippet video and then a part 1. On the anniversary of the day I was put under investigation, I just filmed part 2. I did not shut up about it. And I kept reaching to give the department, hey, each level, can you guys take a look at this? I don't want this to go to the point where I'm doing litigation. That was never my desire. But you don't dismiss people after literally calling them an ogre. Like, go away. That's basically what it was. And even at the turning point where things could have been right or made right, no one was willing to step up and do that. Because again, I am comfortable in my position, and her little family, what does that matter? And I have to say this is not what you do to another human being. And I tell you why. I am glad that I am strong in my faith. I don't know how many people out there, and, really prayers to families of people who have lost their lives because they thought of their own demise because they were so embarrassed or mistreated or no one's listening to them. The department did not think about my family once. And they're still not thinking about my family because I haven't shut up about any of this. I've been very vocal, and not one person has said, what we should be doing if we're wearing uniform and not the uniform wearing us. Let's stop this train. Let's have that conversation with her. Let's find out, how do we fix this? Because now it's gone for 3.5 years. How do you correct it at this point? How do you say something as simple as a sorry? Like, what can we do to actually fix it? Now, along the way, I had people claiming that they wanted to do that. Well-wishers. I had someone tell me, hey, you just got to let it play out. And I'm sorry, Sean, that person looks like me.
Oh,
So
I
it
know
went,
I know the department.
yes. And
Um,
my problem with that is that I have stretched and put my neck out on the line to protect those that are lower ranking than me, even if it didn't make me popular, even if it made me speaking out too much. Oh my gosh, if I could tell you, Sean, how many people have grabbed my sleeve, pulled my back of my coat. Yeah, don't go in there and talk about that. Ooh, just keep your head down. You know, you're better than me. That thing when somebody's telling you that they think you're stupid. If I had a dime for every time someone tried to tell me not to say something because that's a landmine, or that could cause you this, or, you know, decide what hill you want to die on. Why are you reporting this? One commander asked me. None of this stuff on this paper is about you. You're reporting something for all these other people. That, do you know how damaging that could be to your career? I don't care. If I was putting this uniform on to do the right thing and all of that love and harmony and protecting and serve and all of those buzzwords that are on the wall, maybe I'm the crazy one because I bought it. I believe in the leadership. I believe in having good integrity. I believe in treating people right. I'm not their judge and jury. That comes later on if they're arrested or if they're being housed in a court, in the custody, if they're in the court system. I'm not the person that's supposed to actually hold court right along in the streets, right along with arrest. I'm not the one in custody that's going to mistreat someone simply because I'm wearing a badge and I'm the big bad person. I speak like I'm speaking to you, Sean, until someone gives me a reason to not be completely respectful. I've had some inmates disrespect me, and I had to check them and say, okay, you know, slow your roll. Don't talk to me like that. I've had partners that I've had to do that with too. And it's in each one of those. The idea, I call myself being both plus one. I am both a Black woman and a law enforcement officer, but I'm also, well, that woman piece is a third dynamic. And I'm glad you actually asked about that. And we talked about that because oftentimes no one remembers that piece. That little component doesn't get talked about much. But a lot of the stuff we're talking about right now, not a lot of people are going to actually stand up and talk about it, let alone write it in a book.
So, do you think that their ultimate goal was to create cause for you to be demoted or fired?
I don't think that they were trying to do that. I think that the allegations could have caused that,
Right.
but there wasn't enough that could justify that.
I get
So
that, but
what
I'm saying, I'm asking you, what do you believe their ultimate goal was to bring up these allegations, to have you demoted or to have you fired?
Well, I've already received the discipline. It was 2 days, and I'm fighting that. So the allegations didn't line up with what the discipline was.
So,
The
what was the
ultimate
discipline?
goal,
Tell me what the discipline was.
2-day suspension. The case has already been completed.
2 days is 2 days suspension without pay.
Yes. For harm to roughly 15 people that I made feel bad.
So they went through all of this to walk away with 2 days suspension without pay and put that in your file after you've been with the department for almost 30 years. And okay, it's in your file. Now what? I mean, you have to be beyond petty to go through all of that for 2 days without pay as discipline.
Absolutely. And what did you say, Sean, earlier? Run it back with a bunch of run it back stuff that had already been asked and answered. And let me also add this. In 2023, a second case was put out there. This time just put in my file as if I had already just been, we already know it. In 2023.
But ultimately, what is this going to do to you? Like, what is this going to do to your career? Was the juice worth the squeeze? They did all of this for 2 days suspension without pay, and now they're facing a lawsuit. Like, somebody has to be held accountable for what seems to me an outgoing of money that was really unnecessary. And no one's going to have to pay a price for what they've done that's going to cost taxpayers their money.
Yes. And
over nonsense.
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And then the second case, might I add, the same day I was questioned, I was able to show proof and fully dispute it, and they had to close it. So you didn't come after me just once. You came after me a second time. I can't tell you what was in the minds of any of the people connected to this. But I think those who were willing to continue to let it roll, those who I equated to me rowing down the river in a canoe. And these flying fish are going over the boat. Some of them are like, I don't want any part of that because I know her. I work with her. She's a good person. I don't want to have anything to do with that because, hey, I don't know much about it. And then there were those that were trying to make it across that canoe, and they missed and fell into the boat and said, hey, I don't want anybody. I'm going to just go along with what everybody is saying. And more and more people were added to the whole problem to keep it going.
I just feel like there needs to be something in place. We talked about policies and procedures 90 minutes ago. We talked about policies and procedures. There needs to be something in place beyond policies and procedures within a department. There needs to be something in place on the state level that if you are found guilty of fabricating X, Y, and Z, that there is going to be a penal price to pay. Absolutely. I have a friend who's retired. He's a former chief. And he said to me, he said it during a game changer training, actually. He said that he felt like if an officer is found guilty of lying on a report, and that lie results in a person going to prison, that member of law enforcement should have to serve double the amount of prison time that the person that they put in jail falsely had to spend. And
Sean, I'm inclined to agree with him.
And I feel like in your case, now this is inside of law enforcement. There's nothing in place that would prevent them from doing this to anybody. Doesn't seem like there's anything been in place that prevents something like this to happen to anybody. Those people won't suffer any consequences. The only consequences that are going to be suffered is my taxpayer dollars and other people's taxpayer dollars, regardless of how they feel about law enforcement. I can assure you that most people I can assure you that nobody wants their taxpayer dollars going toward ridiculous, frivolous lawsuits.
Absolutely.
And it happens all the time.
Yes, it actually does. Shamefully so, it does. And I have to keep going back to but God. I'm so glad that I am a woman of faith and I'm able to draw from that, because a shout out to those who are doing this job very well, because I know that you're there. I've seen and worked with some really great people, but a lot of people who will read this book, Sean, will know exactly who's who that I'm speaking about. They will know because they at different times dealt with some of these same characters. And as you say, nothing really comes from them because for the most part, a large majority of them left after they did the damage.
Oh yeah, so they're just done.
Let me just leave. I don't want to be quite, I want to tell the lies. I want to fabricate this whole case, but I don't want to get up and actually speak about it. Now you want me to be held to answer? Oh no, I'm not going to do that. And honestly, I would have more respect for someone if they just told me, hey, I really honestly didn't care for you. I thought you were a bully. I'm like, don't hide behind, again, that uniform wearing you. You put this all in place boldly. Step up and actually speak to it. Prove it. Show that it actually happened. But there is nothing. The evaluations were huge, and God bless the supervisor that stuck to their guns and didn't allow himself to be swayed in changing my evaluations. You know, God bless those who were really paying attention, the person who hired me for that position and gave me all of that autonomy to do my job, and many successes, Sean, that they can't dispute, even while in that assignment. And from what I'm hearing, it's all been just reversed as if it never happened, because you got to get that narrative. Once you set that narrative in place, you got to keep it going.
Yeah.
You've got to go the full distance. And fortunate for me, full distance was 2 days. But if it was really as egregious as you were trying to make it seem, I'm agreeing with you. There should have been a demotion, maybe a firing, if I had ever done any of those things. And I assure you, and I say this emphatically, I have never mistreated anyone with a disability. I have never bullied any of my staff, intimidated them. There was no workplace harassment of people at work. And those words are buzzwords that mean you have to go forward. So the right words were put in place so that they would ensure that this would stick. So you had to make me a bully because you had nothing with my work that you could attack. And then what was really hurtful is, I'm sorry, shout out to the CPT where I grew up and my village people, the people that were part of the village that I grew up in, because it wasn't what people think. There were some really powerful, great people that I grew up with that were part of my village who would not have let me step out of line. I left home at 17, Sean, going into the military. 18, I'm sorry, the year that I graduated.
Which branch?
Army, and then Army National Guard.
So are you a veteran?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I am. And so, when did I have time? That's what I wanted to ask them. When did I have time for you to fabricate that I'm connected to being a gangster? When? You would probably go and talk to people that I grew up with, and they're like, her? No, she was a nerd. She was a cheerleader, but she was a nerd. When did I have time to be this bully from back in the day? And it was said often that I was claiming that I was from Compton, and that was intimidating to people. I'm like, are you serious? When people are talking about what high school they went to, what college, and you're sitting around having conversations with people, of course you speak about where you grew up. Of course you speak about where you're from.
Are you on Instagram?
I am.
So
not very good at it. I'm a dinosaur with
her
it.
name, but I want you to go on to Instagram and look up Compton is not dangerous. Compton isn't dangerous. It's a clothing line. And with you being from there, I met the young lady a couple of months ago. She attended a game changer training in Compton at the Dollar Hyde Rec Center, and she has this brand. Compton isn't dangerous, and I think that you would like it. So I'm shouting her out because
I love it.
All you're saying about your hometown and how she feels about her hometown. CeeCee, let me ask you this: with all that you have experienced in the profession, what advice would you give someone who is thinking about becoming a member of law enforcement?
Do it. Be part of the change, because if it doesn't, if good people stop going in there into the profession, it'll never get better. And we can't cry that there's not a whole lot, because there can be stoppages from people being the applicants going through, but I say keep applying, keep pushing. Take your integrity and all you have within you to do the job the way it's intended, not from days of old, but if it's really about protecting and serving the community. We are servant leaders. And that is not a subservient and we're mealy mouthed and you're calling, I'm not a servant. That's the first thing that people think about. Being a servant is one of the most powerful things that anybody could ever do, to be able to kneel down and do something for someone else. You cannot say, I'm willing to lay down my life for my brother. I am my brother's keeper. All this brotherhood, but it only goes to a certain point. If you cannot embrace your fellow human race, that's a problem, a sincere problem. So I would tell people, cliche, be the change that you would like to see. Please don't stop applying. Please don't stop going into the profession. I'm not soured on the mission. This didn't get me to the point where, hey, I hate law enforcement and this is just ridiculous, because it is not about me, Sean. It's about the generations to come when my teeth are in a jar next to my bed.
Let's hope you take better care of your teeth than that.
Yeah, you never know, though. I'm going to get older one day and I'm okay with it. But just the idea of applying, be part of that change. Those that were in the Mentor Me program that I started, I shout out to them. There are some beautiful women that were a part of that program, and we would come together and discuss how to make things better. I am working on a program so that people can actually, let's flesh out what you're needing to get to that point where you understand the importance of doing things the right way. Because if we just kind of throw our hands up, I don't want to have anything to do with that. No, I'm not applying to that. That's craziness, po, 5-0, whatever. It'll never actually get better. And realistically, there are a lot of people who would love to see people discouraged like that so they could just go away, like it was intended for me to just go away. And it did not happen.
Talk to me about your hat.
My hat. Oh, okay. Well, first of all, I'm a hat person. If you know me, I'm always going to be wearing a hat. This hat is SIC, sick, and is strong in Christ. So when I was about 12, I would write poetry and I would always draw an S and then it would sit atop a cross at the end of each poem. About 11 years ago, Eric and I were talking about that, and the idea was morphed into strong in Christ, adding the C. And if you can see it, I don't know if it's where you can see the actual symbol, but there's a rock where the letter C is sitting on top of it because Christ is the rock. The cross is there stuck in it, almost like a sword. And then the S is still sitting on the top, kind of like when I was a kid. So Strong in Christ is part of the brand and the branding, like the jersey that I'm wearing, my own design of the World University of Jesus Christ. We honor all of our favorite athletes. Well, he just happens to be mine, and he's in the concession stand, on the field, in every walk of life for me. So Christ's name is on my back, and I probably wore a jersey for the first time to a game recently at SoFi. So that's the whole basis of sick. And it is also on my sleeve, the same symbol. Right. And then on this side, there are 3 drops of blood for the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
That's beautiful. So CeeCee Strong, founder and creator of Spilling the LT. Talk to me about Spilling the LT.
So lieutenants are often referred to as LT. And people are always talking about spilling the LT. So I actually have a Facebook page, which you snaked that picture of the evaluation.
People are always talking about spilling the LT?
No, spilling the tea.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is my career was just spilled. I was spilled. I have another book coming out, Spilling the LT is the title. And it goes a little more in depth of to my story. And originally I was going to have me being poured out of the spout. Like I'm just being poured into the rest of the things that are splashing all over the table. So it is a page on Facebook if people are interested in knowing more about the story. I've got some live videos there where I'm talking about certain things that took place. And so I titled it Spilling the LT.
Are you self-publishing these books?
I did. I self-published this one, and I will be self-publishing going forward.
Okay, so I want to give you an opportunity to plug whatever you want to plug.
Okay. Well, I will plug the book writing, and I have to give hats off to my mentor. His name is Israel Duran, who pretty much told me and inspired me by saying, your career, he says, stop saying your career has been derailed. CeeCee, your destiny was activated. People need to hear your story. So the series of books are Betrayal The Badge, Spilling the LT, Back Against the Wall, and the last one will be Destiny Activated. There's also jerseys, www.worlduniversityofjesuschrist.org. You can go there, you can order a book, the Betrayal The Badge book, where I will personally sign and ship a copy to you. So make sure you get your copy of Betrayal The Badge.
What's that website address again?
That website is all under the same one with the jersey. So www.worlduniversityofjesuschrist.org.
Okay.
And you can go there to the university, quote unquote, bookstore, all virtual, because Christ is the MVP on life's campus. Hence the name of the actual business, WUJC. You can find me there, and the best place right now following me is the Spilling the LT, which is on Facebook. You can like and follow, and from there you'll get the other information on how to get in touch with me. Shout out.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have to shout out Game Changers, which brought me to meeting Sean Shepard. I firmly believe, Sean, that yes, there is a need for a game change. Sincerely. And he did not pay me to say that. I am good with rhyming to a certain degree. But there needs to be a change in the game. And the change doesn't have to be a shift that people fear, that suddenly people want to uprise and do a takeover. That's not what it is. People just want to be treated fairly, to have the same opportunities of other people. And when it comes to law enforcement in the community, we need to stop fighting each other and work together.
Listen, amen. Amen to that. And it's coming from a great source. CeeCee, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to speak about the profession and tell your story. I don't even like calling it a story, and talk to us about your life experience inside and outside of the profession. I can't thank you enough. Again, this was streaming on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and will be available on all three of those platforms. We're working on TikTok. This is a long time coming. I'm glad we were able to do this. CeeCee Strong.
Thank you.
Los Angeles County Sheriff Department Lieutenant, and her book, Betrayal The Badge. Go get yourself a copy. CeeCee, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean, for having me. God bless.
God bless you too. We out.